Part 4, The Bitter Peace, Laying the Groundwork for the Next Catastrophe. Chapter 12, The Breaking Point, Empires Crumble, the Guns Fall Silent. By the dawn of 1918, 4 years of unprecedented slaughter and material consumption had brought every belligerent to the precipice of collapse. The big lie of swift victory had long since evaporated, replaced by a grim determination to endure. But even endurance has its limits. The final year of the Great War would witness a desperate last gamble by Germany, a relentless Allied counteroffensive, and a cascading collapse of empires, each brought to its breaking point by the unbearable weight of total war. The guns, which had roared ceaselessly for 1,561 days, would finally fall silent, leaving behind a world irrevocably altered and scarred, a world poised not for peace, but for a precarious, bitter peace. Germany's last gasp, the unraveling of the war machine. With Russia out of the war and the Eastern Front dismantled, Germany's high command, led by General Erich Ludendorff, saw a final, desperate window of opportunity. Before the full might of American manpower could be brought to bear, Germany would launch one last, massive offensive, a knockout blow to win the war. The final offensive, exhaustion and failure on the Western Front. The German Spring Offensive, launched on March 21, 1918, codenamed Operation Michael, was an audacious gamble. Ludendorff concentrated nearly every available German division, including battle-hardened stormtroopers transferred from the east. Employing new infiltration tactics and short, intense artillery bombardments, the Germans achieved astonishing initial successes. They pierced Allied lines, pushed the British back dozens of miles, and advanced further than any army on the Western Front since 1914, threatening Paris once more. For a few terrifying weeks, it seemed the big lie of a decisive German victory might yet become a reality. However, the offensive eventually collapsed under its own weight. The rapid advances stretched German supply lines to their breaking point over devastated ground, leaving their attacking troops starved and undersupplied. The new stormtroopers, elite and irreplaceable, suffered heavy casualties. Allied reserves, particularly the fresh American divisions, began to arrive, bolstering resistance. Most crucially, the sheer attrition, the relentless grinding down of manpower, became insurmountable. German troops, though fighting valiantly, were exhausted, demoralized, and starving from years of blockade. The big lie that sheer willpower could overcome logistical and human limits had proved false, and with the failure of the Spring Offensive, the last vestiges of German hope began to fade. The unstoppable tide, the Allied 100 Days Offensive. With Germany's last offensive spent, the Allies, now under the unified command of Marshal Ferdinand Foch, launched their own relentless counteroffensive. What began as a local British attack at the Battle of Amiens on August 8, 1918, a day Ludendorff himself called the Black Day of the German Army, quickly became a continuous, rolling advance. This marked the beginning of the 100 Days Offensive. The Allies, now equipped with superior numbers, increasing air superiority, and a vastly improved understanding of combined arms tactics, applied relentless pressure along the entire Western Front. Wave after wave of infantry, supported by increasingly reliable tanks, as seen in Chapter 8, artillery firing devastating creeping barrages, and aircraft providing reconnaissance and ground support, systematically pushed the German army back. There were no grand, singular breakthroughs, but rather a series of coordinated, hammer-blow attacks that denied the Germans any opportunity to regroup or establish stable defensive lines. German morale, already brittle, shattered under this unstoppable tide. Retreat became constant, and desertions soared. The Kaiser's military machine, once seemingly invincible, was finally, irrevocably broken. The domino effect, Central Powers collapse. As Germany's war machine unraveled on the Western Front, its allies, already exhausted and reeling from years of conflict and internal strife, began to crumble in a dramatic cascade. The big lie of a unified Central Powers alliance dissolved into a flurry of desperate armistices and nascent revolutions. Bulgaria's fall, the first domino. The first crack in the Central Powers alliance appeared in the Balkans. In September 1918, a combined Allied force, including French, British, Serbian, and Greek troops, launched a successful offensive on the Macedonian front, Salonika front. Bulgaria, its army decimated by disease, hunger, and battle fatigue, offered little resistance. On September 29, 1918, Bulgaria signed the Armistice of Salonika, becoming the first Central Power to surrender. Its exit had immediate strategic repercussions, severing Germany's direct rail link to the Ottoman Empire and further isolating the remaining allies. The first domino had fallen. The Ottoman Empire's last breath, Mudros, and the end of a millennium. Simultaneously, the ancient Ottoman Empire, already on its last legs after years of war against Russia, Britain, and the Arab Revolt, as detailed in Chapter 7, was delivered its final blow. General Allenby's decisive offensive in Palestine in September 1918, the Battle of Megiddo, utterly destroyed the remaining Ottoman armies in the Levant. With its forces routed and its capital, Constantinople, vulnerable, the Ottoman government sought an armistice. On October 30, 1918, the Armistice of Mudros was signed aboard the British battleship HMS Agamemnon. This agreement effectively ended the Ottoman Empire's participation in the war and, indeed, marked the true end of a millennium-old empire. Its implications were immense. The sick man of Europe had finally died, paving the way for the partitioning of its territories by the victorious Allies and laying the groundwork for the modern Middle East. Austria-Hungary's disintegration, a dying empire's final agony. The Habsburg Empire, the primary instigator of the war, experienced the most complete and chaotic disintegration. Already a multi-ethnic patchwork barely held together, its military defeats and internal revolts proved fatal. On the Italian front, the demoralized Austro-Hungarian army faced a final Italian offensive at Vittorio Veneto in October 1918. The Habsburg lines collapsed, and the retreat quickly became a rout. More profoundly, the empire was dissolving from within. As news of military defeat spread, the diverse ethnic groups, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, South Slavs, and Hungarians, began to declare their independence, establishing new nation-states. The big lie of imperial unity, maintained by force for centuries, shattered. On November 3, 1918, Austria-Hungary signed the Armistice of Villa Giusti, effectively ending its participation in the war as a unified entity. Its collapse was not just a military defeat, but the complete, irreversible unraveling of a dynastic empire. Germany's revolution, Kaiser gone, Republic born. With its allies falling like dominoes and its army reeling, Germany itself faced internal revolt. The cumulative impact of military defeat, severe home front privations, including the turnip winter, and the Spanish flu, and growing political discontent finally broke the nation's resolve. On October 29, 1918, sailors at Kiel, ordered to embark on a suicidal final battle against the Royal Navy, mutinied. This act of defiance sparked widespread revolts across Germany. Soldiers and workers' councils, inspired by the Russian Revolution, formed in cities, demanding an end to the war and political reform. Faced with widespread unrest and abandoned by his generals, Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last vestige of Imperial Germany, was forced to abdicate on November 9, 1918, and fled to the Netherlands. A new provisional government, led by Social Democrats, immediately declared a republic, the Weimar Republic, and committed to seeking peace. The big lie of an invincible, Imperial Germany, sustained by autocratic power and military might, had finally collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. The 11th hour, when the killing finally stopped. With the Kaiser gone and Germany in revolutionary turmoil, the path to peace was clear. German civilian representatives, empowered by the new Republican government, sought an armistice based on President Wilson's 14 points, hoping for a more lenient settlement. The armistice, negotiations and the terms of surrender. On November 8, 1918, a German delegation, led by Matthias Erzberger, crossed the lines into Allied territory. They met with Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the Allied Supreme Commander, in Foch's private railway carriage in the misty forest of Compiègne. There were no negotiations. Foch presented the Germans with harsh, non-negotiable terms of surrender designed to make it impossible for Germany to resume fighting. The terms included an immediate cessation of hostilities, the withdrawal of German troops from all occupied territories, the surrender of vast quantities of military equipment, tanks, aircraft, 5,000 artillery pieces, 25,000 machine guns, the handing over of Germany's high seas fleet, and the occupation of the Rhineland. The Germans were given 72 hours to accept or resume fighting. With their army in retreat, their allies gone, and their country in revolt, they had no choice. At 5 a.m. on November 11, 1918, the armistice was signed. The big lie that the German army had not been militarily defeated, perpetuated by some German generals for later political purposes, would become a dangerous myth. Silence on the front, the unimaginable calm of November 11. The armistice was to take effect 6 hours after signing, at 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month. Tragically, fighting continued right up to the deadline, claiming thousands more lives in those final, senseless hours. Generals, keen to gain a few more yards or punish the enemy one last time, often ignored the coming peace. Then, at precisely 11 a.m., November 11, 1918, it happened. The roaring, grinding, ceaseless cacophony of the Western Front, which had defined existence for over 4 years, simply ceased. The shelling stopped. The machine guns fell silent. The shouts and screams faded into an eerie, profound calm. Private George Edwin Ellison, a British soldier, recorded in his diary. And then, at 11 o'clock, there was a sudden, strange silence. Just silence. It was deafening. We stood there, blinking, unable to believe it. No more whistling shells, no more rattling guns, no more screams. Just the sound of our own breathing, and then, a distant cheer, choked and raw, rippling down the line. We crept out of the trench, shaking hands with the Germans across no man's land, not as enemies, but as survivors. And then, the tears came. For all of us. For those who were there, and for all those who weren't. Across the front, soldiers emerged from their dugouts, dazed by the sudden quiet, many openly weeping. There were cautious cheers, embraces, and sometimes, a quiet fraternization with the enemy, united in their shared survival and overwhelming relief. In cities across the world, news of the armistice sparked spontaneous, wild celebrations, dancing in the streets, parades, ringing church bells. But beneath the euphoria lay an incalculable sorrow for the millions lost, and a dawning realization that the world had emerged from the furnace of war fundamentally changed, its future uncertain. The killing had stopped, but the echoes of the big lie would continue to reverberate, laying the groundwork for the next catastrophe.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please don't forget to like, comment and share this video. Also don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon, so that you don't miss out the next video. For now, you can continue with the next video or can go through the complete playlist provided here.